I'm Beth Alpert Nakhai from Arizona Center for Judaic Studies, and my topic is keeping fieldwork safe from sexual harassment and physical violence. I hope that many of you are familiar with this slide, the introduction to the recent survey on field safety, Middle East, North Africa, and the Mediterranean Basin, which I launched at the beginning of September. I was drawn into this project when I read the preliminary results of work done by 4 anthropologists, Catherine Clancy, Robin Nelson, Julianne Rutherford, and Katie Hind. At the 2013 meeting of the American Association of Physical Anthropologists, Clancy stated that undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs, and faculty report sexual harassment and assault not only by their peers, but by their bosses and mentors in the field. She blogged their work in Scientific American, and they published it this year in PLOS ONE. I was gripped by the knowledge that in our own field as well, things are far from ideal. I recalled things I had witnessed and stories I had heard that may not have been commonplace, but neither were they exceptional, nor limited to some indeterminate time in the past. Therefore, I committed myself to doing what I could to make it possible for people to engage in field work across our broad region without fear of intimidation, harassment, and violence based on gender, sexual orientation, and/or gender identity. I recognize that as an ASOR trustee and chair of ASOR's initiative on the status of women, I was in a fortunate position. I was confident that ASOR leadership would support my efforts, and this confidence has not been misplaced. Since my first presentation to the ASOR Board of Trustees in the spring of 2013, ASOR has committed itself to the success of this project. I especially want to thank Tim Harrison, Susan Ackerman, Andy Vaughn, Caitlin Anderson, Cynthia Rufo, and Lynn Swartzstad. I realized that this project would have multiple components, which would include quantifying the problem through some kind of survey and creating an educational component by means of which every person engaged in fieldwork would have access to information about her or his rights and responsibilities. The first stage of this project, the survey, is essentially complete. In order to work with human subjects, I took the mandated trainings and developed the Field Safety Survey. I extend my thanks to my colleagues at the University of Arizona and to the staff at Qualtrics, the company that hosts the survey, for their help. I launched the survey on August 29th through the ASOR Facebook page and then through a posting on News at ASOR. In addition, I contacted professional societies, institutes, academies, antiquities authorities, listservs, and more, as well as those committees and professional societies that advocate for women working in our field. Although I cannot quantify the success of my outreach efforts, hearing from a colleague on my campus that she had received the survey from a colleague in Madagascar indicated that it circulated widely. Of the nearly 300 people who opened the survey, close to 200 completed most or all of it. Before I show you some of the results, I want to share some comments I have heard. Some people suggested that the survey was not statistically valid since I had no way of knowing how many people it reached or how many people who took it had vested interests that could skew the results. To this I responded that my primary interest was not developing a statistically valid database, but rather learning about dig culture and determining what needed to be done to make excavations safe. Some people suggested that the survey was stacked to elicit negative responses. To this I responded that all questions were open-ended and that people could and did describe experiences both excellent and terrible and much in between. Some veterans of multiple excavations noted that it was difficult to fill out the survey because there was no mechanism for discussing more than one field report. Some people feared that filling out the survey would make them vulnerable to repercussions, regardless of my absolute commitment to confidentiality. Some people hoped that the survey would be about safety in war zones or about safety from the physical hazards of the excavation process, both topics that also need to be addressed. Finally, some dig directors told me that simply working through the survey provided them with new ways of thinking about measures they might like to take to ensure increased safety on their excavations. I consider this already a mark of success. Now let us turn to the survey results. First, the demographics. As of November 9th, there were nearly 200 responses from people in 24 countries. 55% of the respondents were between the ages of 22 and 39. 63% were female and 37 male. No respondent self-identified as transgendered. 90% identified as heterosexual, 4% lesbian or gay, 4% bisexual, and 2% other. Next, education and employment. For 5%, high school was the highest degree attained. For 14%, a bachelor's degree. For 31%, a master's degree. And for 47%, a doctorate. Respondents indicated more than 30 professional or academic statuses. Now to fieldwork. Respondents listed work in 22 countries in the survey region and indicated almost 50 areas of specialization or interest. Only 19% of the field projects were in urban settings. The rest were rural or isolated. Almost half the respondents had worked for 4 or more years on the project they discussed. Their responsibilities range from director or co-director, 19%, to volunteer or paid digger, 15%, and many other positions were indicated as well. For the excavations reported, 40% lacked female directors, while only 21% lacked male directors. Staff was split fairly evenly by gender. More women than men were dig volunteers. Almost no paid workers were women. Turning to field safety, almost half the digs had a relatively well-valued code of conduct. Just over half those codes included information on sexual violations. Nearly half the codes mandated reporting for violations, but less than half mandated follow-up and repercussions for those violations that were reported. To the extent that there were repercussions, 2/3 were seen as meeting excavation, university, or other legal codes. Appropriate health care was available at 3/4 of the digs, ombudspeople at only 17%. What was excavation culture like? About 1/5 of digs were described as accepting of sexual violations, and some people felt compelled to hide aspects of their sexual orientation and/or gender identity. Drug and/or alcohol abuse was a problem on more than half the digs, 58%. Additional problems included other kinds of violence, 22%, racial and/or religious harassment, 29%, theft, 25%, and vandalism, 14%, expropriation of professional contributions, 25%, and other violations, 22%. Many people also witnessed or experienced comments of a harassing and/or intimidating nature. These included appropriate and/or hateful sexual remarks and negative comments about physical attributes, dress, gender, sexual orientation, and gender presentation. Nearly 1/3 of respondents reported differentiation in fieldwork and post-fieldwork assignments and opportunities based on gender, sexual orientation, and/or gender identity, while just over half perceived excavation standards, expectations, and rewards to be equitably managed. About 1/5 of respondents witnessed or experienced physical assault or violence. Many of the perpetrators were individuals in position of authority on the excavation. The responses to those violations that were reported, whether in the field or after the field season, were wide-ranging. A number of people indicated ambivalence about reporting and noted the lack of any positive reaction to their reports. At various points throughout the survey, people recounted violations of their physical and/or emotional integrity that they had never before discussed, and indicated their appreciation at being able to do so now. Additionally, a number of people noted their willingness to participate in follow-up discussions, and I am pursuing those opportunities. In addition to documenting and quantifying experiences, the goals of this project include building collaboration among professional societies and institutes in order to better determine those factors that contribute to safe and unsafe fieldwork environments, to identify areas in which further research is necessary, to determine best practices and the means by which to implement them, to develop standards, policies, and protocols designed to educate and inform all participants on archaeological excavations, about ethics and laws in the field and on research projects, and under the auspices of ASOR to develop protocols and trainings and provide access to relevant documents for excavation leaders, staff, volunteers, and employees. I invite those of you who are interested in this to join me in this next critically important stage. Thank you.